All right, welcome back. So we have a new guest here. It is Tim from Online Big Blue Sports. I started watching Tim maybe a few months ago. Loved his honesty. Think he's a great dude and he knows his stuff. So Tim, welcome to the channel.
Well, you must be too nice because if you think I'm a good dude, you got some serious problems. Evidently, you haven't watched enough.
Well, yeah, still. I appreciate honesty.
I appreciate you having me on, though.
Of course, no problem. Yeah, so mostly we're going to talk about the Giants offseason and what we expect. Of course, there's some big contract discussions for two of our main players. We're going to touch on the draft and all those sorts of things. And if you guys like this duo, then maybe we'll do a live stream down the line because I know people may like that. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, all right, so the first thing, let's talk about Isaiah Hodgins. That happened a couple hours ago. He gets this contract extension. It was called an exclusive rights free agents deal, right? So you know more about contracts than me. What the hell does that mean? How much is he getting paid and all that type of stuff?
You know, it's funny. I saw it come up on Twitter when I was driving, and I actually do not know the details. I have not seen the contracts. He was an unrestricted free agent when we picked him up during the latter half of the season. So I mean, like I said, I would have to really I'm doing the typical thing that you do on YouTube, everything else. I'm Googling it right now to see exactly what he signed for, and see exactly where he's at. I mean, it's one of those things. He's 24 years old. He had 33 receptions, I think, for 350 yards. Yeah, and he's a former Bills player coming back. I think he was a 6th round pick.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. And, you know, I mean, if you think about it, did you really think you were going to get anything out of him? Did you really think that when the Giants signed him, because we had the dangerous David Sills, you know, and he is, you know, coming out of West Virginia, the former quarterback who we had waited, I don't know how many seasons.
It's been a while, right? I kind of gave up on him myself. I mean, you know, at what point do you just give up?
So when the Giants sign these ancillary players, you kind of wonder, is it going to be something that we don't know? Is it going to be that thing? I always attune it to the Knicks. How the Knicks, I know you're a Nets fan, how the Knicks used to go out and sign former 1st round picks and they were going to fix them. They were going to make them better. They were going to go from there. And I do see he signed an exclusive rights free agent contract. That's basically for any guy who hasn't had 3 seasons under his belt, and it's an expiring contract. So, it's usually based on the league. It's usually based on the league minimum, or it's based on how many seasons he's played in the league and how many games. So I'm not even exactly sure how many games he has played outside the Giants. I think that's really his bulk of work came this last season.
He might have played last year a bit. I'll effort that real quickly, but it definitely wasn't much. I mean, it might have been 2 years. I mean, he did play. He was on the roster in 21 for the Bills, but he didn't really get any stats. He had no stats last year. So couldn't tell you how many games he played, but no stats. And then, of course, this year he had 41 yards with the Bills and then played the rest of the games with the Giants and had some success with the 351 yards, as you mentioned, 4 touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, he deserves it. I mean, the conversation really is like, what do you think his ceiling is? Because we kind of did this with Darius Slayton a few years back, and people were like, oh, he's a wide receiver 1. And I'm like, he might be a 2. Let's calm down here. So with him, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I feel like his ceiling is probably a wide receiver 2, but I look at Hodgins as a wide receiver 3 right now. But where are you at?
You know, it was funny because when beginning of the season, and I did a couple of videos about it, I was extolling the virtues of why Darius wasn't on the field, because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why he was in the doghouse, because I do think he is a true number 2. And I even said, you know, I don't think he's a number 1, just like I don't think Sterling Shepard's number 1, but he's a good guy to have on the field. He's a guy that can get you the yards. He can move the sticks. With the small sample we've seen from Hodges, I think it's hard. I've seen too many wide receivers, and I've been watching football since '76. So I've seen too many wide receivers come into the league, have not big, or have a good to average season for a short period of time and then flame out the next year. I've always talked about the fact that when you come into the league, when you play an extended period of time after the league does not have film on you. So they don't know your tendencies.
Yep.
So as soon as they got film on them, now the league is going to know, okay, On third down, he likes to do this. He likes to cut his route this way. So it's going to be different. That's why we say you can never judge a draft class until after year 3, because year 1, you usually take it by storm most of the time. Year 2, you have the sophomore, slump because the league has figured you out and had film. Year 3, you should figure out by then what you need to do from year 1 to 2 to 3 to improve yourself, and then you'll prove that you're a player. Now, of course, that players have gone on to year 4 and been excelled, but I get leery because I don't want to overhype somebody, but then you also don't want to be referred to as negative by pointing out some flaws and some tendencies in his game, because the fact that when you have a limited wide receiver base that we did, and someone comes in and performs above average, sometimes that expectation goes up a little higher than maybe it should.
That's a big thing. Yeah, I think we even feel that way as like an entire fan base because of having like, terrible seasons for the past 5 years. And we finally get a bit of success and we're just like, this is amazing. It can't go any worse than this. And, we think it's going to keep going up. So I completely get how you feel about that. But yeah, as I said, for me, wide receiver 3 type guy. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just think like he's the type of guy you can put on the outside. This team still needs a guy. I mean, we thought it was going to be Golladay at one point. I don't know if you like, did you like that signing or no at the time?
Oh no. I see you haven't been listening because I have, I use sound effects, people that do watch, and I have the smooth sounds of Kenny G, and it's basically smooth sounds of Kenny G, 72 million, not worth it. You can plainly see. And I said that the day they signed them, and I got so much crap for it because of the fact that I said I don't like signing, because of the fact that you heard rumblings out of Detroit. You heard rumblings that he could have came back from the hip pointer, but he was just trying to cash in on his contract, which I understand. As a player, you want to make your money. That he's a little bit disgruntled, that he had most of his touchdowns in one season, which I believe he had 10 in one season, and he's playing in a dome and he's playing with Matthew Stafford.
Right.
I mean, all those things, you take it away, you put him outside in MetLife with Daniel Jones and the offensive philosophy we had. What the hell could have gone wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, it was never a recipe for disaster.
He had a lot of things like going right for him, though. I think Stafford was the perfect quarterback for him because he just has that rifle arm, gets it in the tight windows. Like that is a Golladay type quarterback. And I feel like Jones is better with separators. Like I think we've seen that throughout his career so far. Jones is not really a guy who's going to give you the 50-50 ball. We kind of complain about that sometimes because he doesn't give them to Slayton enough. And Golladay never even had a 50-50 ball, did he, with Jones at quarterback? I mean, he had one with Davis Webb, the final game.
With Davis Webb, yeah. And you know what the thing is also? I have friends that live in Detroit. They're big Detroit fans. And I mentioned this a couple times. And I called them up and I said, hey, we got Golladay from you. Yeah, we got Kenny G. And he was like, so? I was expecting more of a reaction for getting Baby Megatron.
Yeah, Babytron. There you go. That's a nickname from the past. Yeah. It went like as the worst way possible, to be honest with you. I mean, 4 years and like $72 million. And, he gave like his first season here wasn't awful. He might have had like 500 yards, didn't find the end zone, but just severely underperformed what he was supposed to do. I give him credit because like this year he could have been way more outspoken. He was after week 2, I think, in the Panthers win. But aside from that, he kind of kept his mouth shut and was a professional about it. But when you're collecting that much money, it's probably not too hard to keep your mouth shut either. But anyway, they need to find a guy.
But here's the thing about that. And I go to the majority of the games.
Yeah.
The majority of the home games. And I will tell you this, and I have to give Kenny G credit because he takes so much abuse from the Giants fan. My seats are in like the 12th row. I'm right on the 50-yard line. And there was a game, I think it was the Texans game, that he played a handful of plays and he dropped the pass.
The drop, yeah.
And there was a group that were unmerciless against him. And I mean, from the second quarter to the fourth quarter, you heard about how much Kenny sucked. And at one point in time, you were hearing it like every 15 seconds.
Right.
And as someone that's been on the field, you hear these things, especially if you hear them repeatedly over and over again. And you know what? I got to give him credit. He took it in stride. He never flipped anyone off. He never did anything. He never moved. And while I do not like him as a player for the Giants, I respect him as a professional.
Yeah.
For what he did just for the season alone, because it has to be a difficult season because of the fact that if you think about it this way, his whole job, his whole career, his whole build up to his aspirations since he was in Pop Warner was catching the football.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden you can't catch it. I go to the Mets analogy with the catcher, Mackie Sasser, who could never throw the ball back to the pitcher. He would triple and then throw it back. I mean, it's like, and that's something you need to do when you're a catcher and you're a wide receiver. You got to catch the damn ball.
But with Golladay, do you think it was more just like wrong team, wrong fit, or was his hip like that messed up where he was just not the same guy? Because there's probably a lot of different reasons it didn't work out, but like, was it just majority injury or just other factors that we're not really talking about?
I think it's the wrong team, wrong fit.
Really? Okay.
And I think it was the Giants competed against themselves.
Yep.
If you're a free agent, and I always love telling the story, you're a free agent like Kenny was, and he went to visit. He went to MetLife. He went for his visit. He wouldn't leave.
A little sleepover. Yeah.
The story is he would not leave. If you have other people bidding for your services and you're not leaving the building, that means you don't have anyone else.
Yeah.
And then what's his name? Curtis Samuel set the market at $36 million with Washington, and then you pay this guy $72, and you know for a fact that your quarterback going into year 3 is coming off a bad season, coming off an injury, and he's coming in after playing with Stafford. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, and then you have Jason Garrett, and I've said this before. I think the edict came down from Joe Judge that we are not going to let Daniel Jones beat us. We're going to limit his turnovers, but we're also going to limit the big play capability because of the fact that we do not want the turnover to be the reason why we lose the game. And that's a bad recipe when you are a guy who makes his forte on the 50-50 ball, who doesn't have tremendous speed, doesn't get separation as it is, and you have a quarterback who has an issue throwing his wide receivers open. So, I mean, it was a recipe for disaster from day one.
That's a great point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that part of it. Like, I kind of hate what they did with Daniel Jones going back to Jason Garrett, Joe Judge. Like I think rookie year Daniel Jones was my favorite version because, yes, there was a crap ton of turnovers and you can't have that many. But the amount of shots that were taken downfield when Shermer was here, I was like, I can get behind this because at least they're trying to push the ball downfield. The last two and kind of even this year, although they use his legs more, it's been more of just like, don't turn the ball over. That's all we're asking you to do. Don't make any risky throws. And like, it's tough to win that way. I mean, we did it because we had Saquon and DJ ran for 700 yards. It worked out on the ground, but it's so hard to consistently win in today's league if you can't push the ball down the field on explosive passing plays. And the Giants didn't have that, whether it was because the lack of receivers or Jones not pushing the ball down the field or the Giants not calling specific plays. It's just tough to, keep that up. So I'm hoping that changes going forward if they do, in fact, add some wide receivers.
What worries me is the fact that with Shermer, and everyone talks about the Shermer season. Shermer is one of those guys. He's like Joe Bugle. He is a great coordinator. He's a terrible head coach. And he's probably always going to be that way. And he always thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. And if he wins, his gas doesn't stink. And when he loses, it's everyone else's fault. But one of the brilliant things that Shermer did, and if you go back and watch the Daniel Jones films, he simplified the game for Daniel Jones. He cut the field in half, gave him a deep option and an intermediate route, and gave him a one-read option and told him throw to that spot. Now, that will work for a period of time, and then you're going to run into a fact that luck kind of runs out, which is why he had a lot of the interceptions and some of the turnovers. And I think that was the brilliance of Shermer, but the only thing is you can't do that for an NFL career. I go back to the old Notre Dame quarterback, Rick Meyer, who when he went to Seattle had a good rookie season, and then the league figured out he couldn't throw to his left. So they just stacked everything to the right. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Shermer. You can cut the field in half, but I think it disserviced him a little bit because it was not allowing. He's not coming from a powerhouse program in Duke, so it's not allowing him to read the field and scan the field. He's giving them the one option, saying throw it unless it's totally covered, if not check down. And that
that happened a lot this year too.
And this year I have to give Kafka. I got to laugh a little bit because it was the play action rollout, and you flare out the tight end. And if the tight end's not available, you run. And that was against the Texans. That was against the Bears. The Bears figured it out in the second half. And it was funny, though, because they ran the play like 3 times in a row once, and then they shut it down. The Texans did the same thing. And I laughed because of the fact that when Jones went out against against Chicago, and Tyrod Taylor came in before he got injured, the Giants really never threw the ball deep. 3 plays into Tyrod Taylor, they take a shot to the end zone with a 55-yard pass that got intercepted, but they took the shot. And I never understood to this day why they didn't do the same thing with Jones, but they waited for Tyrod Taylor to come in, who's just coming off the bench and do something like that.
I know exactly what you're talking about too, and that annoyed me because literally through about the first 13 weeks through the year, Tyrod Taylor had the longest air yards throw on the Giants, and the guy played for like what 5 snaps. I mean, like that should tell you something. Like I get it, and people say, "Oh, it was intercepted, dumb throw," but like at least he's trying. Like what? Why are they letting Tyrod let it loose and not the guy who is supposed to be the franchise quarterback? That's not doesn't make sense to me. So, and yeah, I was gonna say like they did so many of these rollouts this year. I don't know off the top of my head how many of his stats were rollouts and things like that, but I think people don't give Mike Kafka enough credit. I think we saw people say, "Oh, fire Kafka" at some points, and it was the most ridiculous thing ever. And now the last couple of weeks, it's, "Oh, I hope he doesn't leave," and he did come back luckily, but he doesn't get enough credit. And same thing with Dable. Like they tailored this offense in such a way to make it easier for the quarterback, and that should not really take anything away from Daniel Jones. But I do think sometimes people will overestimate, "Oh, he carried us," but like at the same time, how responsible was Saquon for the first 7 wins of the year, and nobody wants to talk about it, So it's like that part kind of annoys me as well, that like there's different narratives out there of like who's to thank for the reason the Giants are winning, and you have people that of course want to give the quarterback all of the credit when really Saquon was doing it the first 7 wins, and the coaching staff and the defense holding teams under 20 points, and it's like, why can't we give everybody credit? So that part doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the thing is, they always talk about the game-winning drives. And I always they always hate me because I always bring up the fact that in 2 of the game-winning drives, he threw the ball once in the 4th quarter.
I have the numbers. If you want me to go over them, I will.
He threw the ball 1 time, and then that to me tells you something. And then he had another game when he completed, I believe, was 14 passes behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah,
that's listen, we're not running the Bill Walsh West Coast offense here. We don't have Joe Montana or Steve Young or I understand that, but you throw the ball 14 times behind the line of scrimmage. I think I could do that and complete 7 passes.
Right.
That's not good. That tells you the confidence that and I hate the fact when it was like, well, we don't have any weapons. We don't have an offensive line. And I think with Skip Bayless, it said it best. If you keep complaining about your offensive line and your lack of weapons, then you don't have a quarterback. Because there have been plenty of quarterbacks in the history of this league who have won. With Eli Manning, 2011 had the worst offensive line in the league and won a Super Bowl. Yeah. And to the point that anyone remembers the 49ers game, he basically had his head turned around sideways and he kept coming out chucking.
Yeah. It's not like he had like these all-pro players. I mean, yeah, no. Hakeem Nicks was a first-round pick, okay, but who the hell was Victor Cruz before that year? Right. Manningham was always a wide receiver 3. Who was the tight end that year? Jake Ballard? Come on.
Yeah, I always love it because Troy Aikman used to call him Hank Ballard through every broadcast, and I used to piss me off. I actually sent him a tweet at one point when he was calling him.
Wow. Yeah. But yeah, the game-winning drives, I have them written down, so I'll go through them real quick.
Yeah. Really here because I don't have written down.
No, because I got in an argument with someone on Twitter who, of course, not Twitter, it was YouTube comments, and they were saying, "Oh, you give him no credit, the game-winning drives, blah, blah, blah." So I said, you know what? I have time. Let me go through all the game-winning drives and see what he actually did on these drives. Week 1, he was 3 for 3 for 11 yards and added 4 rushing yards. So 15 total yards on the game-winning drive. Then he also threw an interception right before that drive too, which was terrible, in the end zone. Week 2, that was the Panthers game. He was 3 for 3 on that game-winning drive, 15 yards and added 3 rushing yards. Graham Gano bails them out with a 56-yarder to win the game. Week 5, I said on the video I made, he was amazing. That Green Bay game, I give him a lot of credit. It was one of his best games all year. I said that in the video. Week 6, which I believe was the Ravens game, that was after the interception by Love, I think it was. He got down to Baltimore's 13-yard line. Daniel Jones, 1 for 2, 7 yards, game-winning drive. Awesome stuff. Then the Week 7 one, he did not complete 1 pass, and he did, in fairness, rush for four rushes and 35 yards. I'll give him that. But that just goes to show you, like, people want to make it sound like it's more than it is. But when you look at the context, and the reason I got mad was because the person in the comments that was mad at me says, I don't use context. I'm like, listen, I will go back and show you exactly what went on in these games. And they still get mad at me. So you can't even come at these people with facts, and they still get hurt. So I don't get it.
Well, stats, and I always say this, you can make stats say anything. 47% of people will tell you that. But the problem is when you use stats and logic to go against a fan who's going with passion, they will sit there and talk about stats until you use it to prove it against them. And then at that point in time, it's just like, oh, you're stupid.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah,
that's usually how it goes. Because if anyone's ever read my comment section, they know I'll go back and forth with you. But it's just you can never outdo passion, and there's just certain people that don't want. And I've said this before, and you're a lot younger than I am, but I've said this before. The fan base right now, in a certain segment of the fan base, only knows Eli Manning. They only know 16 years of Eli Manning. They only know 16 years of his success. They've never been through the Scott Bruners, the Jeff Rutledges, the Ken Grahams, the Danny Cannells. They've never gone through that desert of quarterbacks because they've only known one quarterback. So they automatically assume when you draft a guy, he's the guy. Mm-hmm. But in this league, you draft a guy, there is a good chance that he's not good. The first guy you draft after you have that all-pro guy is probably not going to be the guy. He's like the rebound girl.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't get that, and people always say I'm a Daniel Jones hater. And I always tell people I'm not a Daniel Jones hater. I'm a Daniel Jones realist. I see what's on the field.
Yep.
And I compare it to my knowledge of what I've seen since 76. And I sit there and say, okay, it doesn't fit the mold. Something's not right. And then you see the reports now that they may potentially give him 35 million average. Not 35 million, it's probably going to be less than the first year and then move forward through year 5, but it's going to have to be a 5-year deal because it's the only way you're going to be able to fit it under the cap, sign Saquon Barkley, get your offensive lineman, and hopefully find a linebacker. And also maybe a CB2, potentially a safety if Lovely leaves 2 guards and a partridge in a pear tree. It's really gonna depend. But you are gonna the reason, and the reason why I've said it a million times, they're not gonna franchise tag. They're not even going to use the non-exclusive franchise tag, which is everyone uses, so he can still go out and negotiate with another team because then that other team will owe us 2 first-round picks. And they don't have a fear of. I don't think they have a fear of him leaving. I really don't.
That's what I've been saying, and people don't want to, hear that. But yeah,
no. Well, you hear all these other teams, and I worked in the league for 4 years, and I worked in the AFL, the Arena Football League. I'm not that old that I worked in the American Football League. And I still talk to people, and I've said this a million times on my streams and other shows that people in the league tell me that the buzz about Daniel Jones, there's a bubble in New York, and that's where the buzz is coming from. And not many other teams are like, hey, we got to get this guy. We got to get this guy.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. Like, I'm looking at what teams could Daniel Jones realistically be going to if there was a bidding war for him this offseason. Like it's like less than like 4. I could think of like maybe Washington, maybe Atlanta, but I still don't think so. Maybe the Saints, but they want Derek Carr. Like, what other teams out there will be in this bidding war where you have to give Daniel Jones like
I'm saying
Carolina. Okay. I think that'd be stupid by them, but
Darnold worked out so well. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I feel like Darnold might get another shot. He wasn't that terrible at the end of the season, but what pick are they? They're 7, 9.
They got Pete Walker. They're fine.
It's true. That PJ Walker throw versus the Falcons.
PJ Walker. That's PJ Walker. I keep telling him. I don't know why. I almost called him Paul Walker. All right, no, but that's the thing. There's not a. People are like, well, he'll go on a team where they have playoff aspirations. What is outside? And God bless Leonard Williams. And God bless Leonard Williams because he got paid.
I know that's Rob. King of the almost sack.
King of the almost sack. He got his money. And I said when he had his big season that because I actually spoke to someone that worked in his agency that he wants Aaron Donald money. And people said I was crazy. And then like a couple of weeks later, they said, no, he wants Aaron Donald money. And he got his money. He got paid. But the problem is his money does not equal his production, and which is why now we're in trouble. And which is why we had to give him the dead cap number in 2024 so we could get some operational cap space. So the problem is I worry that DJ is going to do the same thing with a 5-year contract where year 3 is probably where the money is going to be. And who is a free agent in year 3 of his contract? Who are you going to have to pay?
Is that Andrew Thomas?
That's Andrew Thomas.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay your left tackle. And it's one of those things that if Daniel Jones regresses back to what he was, and you have a $40 million cap hit that third year, that's going to limit your ability to sign your free, your Pro Bowl left tackle. And I think of Orlando Brown Jr. when he was with the Baltimore, when he was with the Ravens, and he wanted to get paid the left tackle money, and then they traded him, of course. But he was on a low end rookie deal for like $600,000. But they traded him over to Kansas City, and Kansas City almost didn't sign him. Thank goodness they did. But because of the fact that they had some other guy in Kansas City, they had a sign before that, and it's some quarterback. I don't know. His name's Pete, I think. I don't know. Some guy won a Super Bowl.
Oh,
so but it like I said, it could potentially limit your ability to bring in guys that you need and you need to keep. And I'm not saying he's going to regress, but if he goes back to what he was or what he probably is, you're going to be paying a large chunk of money to a guy that is below average as an NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's where people like me and you differ from others in the fan base that like call us haters, is that they think that if we do get a wide receiver one and in year two in this offense that Daniel Jones makes the Jalen Hurts leap. And like, I don't see that personally. Now it could happen, but I just don't think that's like, because I remember Brett Coleman made this great video. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it's a great breakdown of the Giants, like 25-minute video. He's very good with the X's and O's. And he had this great quote. He was saying, whether a top 5 NFL wide receivers open or a bottom 5 NFL wide receivers open downfield, if the quarterback doesn't throw it, it's the same result. And he's right. I mean, Daniel Jones has shown us like he's not going to take that many chances. And I know people want to blame the receivers, and they have a point because our receivers are nothing to write home about. We get it. But at the same time, he has not shown his from his own ability that he's going to change things up now. I do think Jason Garrett and even Joe Judge kind of messed him up in a way and took away any upside the kid had, which is sad, but he just is what he is now. And I don't think he'll regress either. I'm with you. I think he could get hurt. That's the one way this could not work out, because he did not stay healthy his first 3 years. But I don't see him going backwards now, but it also might be more stagnant than people are willing to be prepared for in a way. So that's the concern I have. And then, of course, we're talking about Andrew Thomas down the line and Dexter Lawrence's contract. And I think you've said this, that like GMs are supposed to look 5 years down the line, right? And coaches coach for now.
Right.
So
coaches coach for the season, GMs coach for the long haul. I mean, GMs go for the long haul.
That's how most fans are. Like, they want to look at it right now and say, "Oh, we'll give Daniel Jones 5 years. It's fine. We'll spread the money out."
and like I said, I never disparage someone when they don't know the salary cap and they don't understand how it works, because it's a difficult thing. I've sat in cap meetings, and of course, this was in the early 2000s, so it's a little different. But there's so many different nuances to the cap. And it was interesting the other day. I was chatting with someone, and I tried to explain to him dead cap space. And I said, just take the fact that you have like $200 million, and because I was doing easy math, and I said you have a dead cap number of 20. I said that's like basically taking your 200 down to 180, because that money's now gone. So that's all the money you now have to sign people. And I said I get concerned when you start getting into that year 3, that if he's not the guy and you decide you want to move on, you could have like a $40 million dead cap number, because the way they're probably going to have to work this contract logistically is give him a large signing bonus up front, which still counts against the cap, but then spread the money over the 5 years and probably guarantee it at least to year 3, kind of like they did with with Leonard Williams. And when that happens, you saw what happened with Leonard Williams. They had to give him that dead cap number in 2024 just so we could have money to sign players this year. And I don't expect fans to understand it. I really don't. But I also, you kind of want to expect them to understand. And everyone uses Ryan Tannehill. He sucks. Ryan Tannehill. Look at Ryan Tannehill's stats compared to Daniel Jones.
Oh
if
my God,
if Ryan Tannehill is average, and what he's done the last 5 seasons in Tennessee, and what he did the other 5 seasons in Miami, and you compare that to Daniel Jones, what does that make Daniel Jones on the scale if Ryan Tannehill's average? What's Daniel Jones then?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm looking at it now because I know his season in 2020 was insane. In 2020, 65 completion percentage, 3,819 yards, 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions.
Yep.
Like, that's ridiculous. If Jones did that, I'd be like, oh, yeah, let's pay him whatever he wants. Yeah.
But, I would be 100% fine with that. But that's what everyone says is the average NFL quarterback. Kirk Cousins. Again, everyone blasts Kirk Cousins as the average NFL quarterback who's being overpaid. Guys got like 7 4,000-yard plus seasons, and I think he's got like 3 seasons with over 30 touchdowns, and he's got another one where he's got I think he's got another 5 over 27. This guy was a 3rd-round pick, and he does get his team in the playoffs. But people always forget Peyton Manning had an issue getting into the playoffs for a little bit too and winning some games. So I mean, if Kirk Cousins is average, and I think he threw for over 4,500 yards this year. I think it was the 2nd or 3rd ranked offense or something. He was in the top 5, but he's average. So you compare that the last 3 years of Kirk Cousins' career, the last 3 years of Daniel Jones's career. What does that make Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about the jersey they wear. I think people sometimes get blinded by that, and I've always made this kind of comparison, like, oh, if Daniel Jones was on a different team, I don't think half of these people, or even more than half, would say the same things they say about him. Like, I think sometimes you can be blinded by fandom, and I used to be that way. I think until I really started forming my own opinions, like back when Dave Gettleman came here, because I was not a fan of what he was doing. That's when I really started to formulate my own opinions, and I was very much against the Barkley pick and a lot of what Gettleman did. And I did want Josh Rosen. I had my misses here and there, but I did know, like, hey, taking a running back there is not what a 3-13 roster needs right now. And it's just not the right investment to make. So ever since that moment, I kind of been forming my own opinions. And then of course the YouTube channel came right after that. And I've developed this reputation of like, oh, like you're a hater and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's better to look realistically at things, because I would rather be pleasantly surprised, which is what this season was this past year, than to get your hopes up every single year. No, we're 4-12 again or something. Like, I don't want to have that. So I think, there's no fake fans out there. We all invest our time very much into this. You can either look at it, with the fan glasses on, or be a critical thinker type fan. I don't think there's a difference personally.
I think the only difference is the way you either present it or the way it's perceived. And I think that is the biggest issue with channels like yours and channels like mine. It's the perception that you're being negative. And I've always said from the day I started my channel, I've taken my fan hat off, and I'm stepping back and looking at this team from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Not from, like I said, I have season tickets. I've had season tickets for years. I went to the 2000 Super Bowl. I went to the 86 Super Bowl. I've been, my family bleeds blue. My father used to tell me stories about Chuck and Charlie Connolly and Y.A. Tittle and Sam Huff. So, those were the bedtime stories I got. So I am a fan 100%. And I hate when people tell me, well, you're not a real fan. And it's like, oh okay. And it's like, but I'm not a real fan because of the fact that I'm just having an opinion. I'm just having an honest opinion. And just as we're supposed to accept their opinion as Daniel Jones is the greatest quarterback that's ever been in Giants history, when you have that rebuttal, and I will admit, I get a little, I don't know what the word is, but I get a little agitated, and I do call them the Daniel Jones panty boys, because they always wear the Daniel Jones panties on their head because they're not seeing anything else. And I mean, right or wrong, I also do it more for an entertainment factor, but I just wish that in some ways everyone would kind of just respect that everyone can have an opinion, and the fact that you're on YouTube or you're on Twitch or whatever, if you have an opinion, it's just your opinion and it's just entertainment. And that's all it is at the end of the day. Cause cause I've gotten comments that you're just like, oh, yikes, this person's really angry and, really needs to, maybe check themselves into some kind of facility, because why would you even write this? Because it's just a game.
Yeah, it's true. It's just opinions, really. Like, I don't know why people get that mad about it. Like, if someone told me as a Nets fan, before he got traded, if someone said to me, "Oh, Kevin Durant's not a leader, he sucks," I'd just be like, "All right," I would just laugh at you. Like, if you think
when you came to the Nets,
yeah.
There's only one true team in New York.
No, we're not doing this,
and it ain't in Brooklyn. Hey, listen,
The team that's 1-9 versus the Nets in their last 10 games.
Didn't they just win?
Yeah,
They also beat Ben Simmons for the first time in, like, I don't know, ever. Listen, I go back to the Jersey Nets. I mean, I go back to Buck Williams, Otis Birdsong, Michael Ray Richardson, Daryl Dawkins, I Dragan Petrovic. I go back to those guys. So they're never going to be the Brooklyn Nets. That's why they're never going to win a championship.
I miss Jersey too, so I get it. But yeah, with the Jones conversation, I'm fine if he's back. I've said that plenty of times. Right. I just don't want this to be the Leonard Williams situation. And I don't think it will be, because I do trust Joe Schoen. I know you feel the same way. I trust Joe Schoen. He is nowhere near what Dave Gettleman was. But I want Schoen to make his own decision. I don't want this to be John Mara influenced, fan base influenced, media influence. I want, Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, the rest of the front office to come to just a well thought out agreement to what the Giants should do at the quarterback position. Because people do act like, oh, Daniel Jones is irreplaceable. And I'm like, you can find that production elsewhere. I mean, I've sent you the Tyrod Taylor 2017 stats. Yes, Daniel Jones was a bit better, but you're still getting 85, 90% of what Jones was giving you. Is it worth paying an extra $20 million?
Look at Marcus Mariota, what he did this year in Atlanta. And he had arguably, he had Kyle Pitts, who also got hurt, but he had less talent around him than Daniel Jones did. And he has similar, if not better, statistics. But my question is this. Let's just be devil's advocates for a second here. It's 2023. Daniel Jones got his contract. Guaranteed. He's got his 5-year contract, guaranteed through year 3. He gets his wide receiver, let's say, or we get some wide receivers, and Saquon stays. But statistically, he's exactly the same. But the Giants are finish the season 3 games under 500. Is that a failure, or is that still a successful season? Because I think they're going to take a step back next year because the schedule is going to get harder. But how then do you rate Daniel Jones, knowing that you have 2 more seasons left on that minimum on that contract?
Well, you know how New York is. They'll turn on him very quickly. I mean, it'll go from like, we need him back, until like, oh, this guy sucks. Why do we sign it? Like, that's how it's going to be. So I don't know. I kind of agree with you. Like, I do think we kind of overachieved this year, and 9-7-1, I feel like could turn into 7 or 8 wins next year, and you might miss the playoffs. I don't think they'll be a bad team. I can't see them being a bad team with the coaches they have. It just feels like almost impossible. I shouldn't say that, but it feels tough to have a bad season with these coaches now that they're all back. So yeah, they'll be fine, but I do fear mediocrity. I would much rather be a bottom 5 team than somewhere in the middle. I don't want to be, because we were talking about Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, and Tannehill, those type of quarterbacks. Those guys don't really win anything. Like, they're nice to have, but do Vikings fans love having Kirk Cousins? I mean, did the Raiders fans love? I mean, it's just that purgatory. You don't want to be stuck in the middle. And I'm afraid Daniel Jones gets us stuck in the middle for the next, 3, 4, 5 years.
You love something until it's gone. And that's, I always go back to Phil Simms. Phil Simms, everyone you had an opinion about Phil Simms from the moment they drafted him in 79 to the day he retired in 93. And it wasn't until he retired and you then had the Grahams and the Cannells and the Browns come in, did the people then realize, we kind of had something for 14 years with this guy. And I worry about that as well. I also worry about the fact that the team started 6-1 and then went 3-7-1.
Yeah.
In the latter half of the season. If we do not, if we're going to be honest, like the Jacksonville game, that's an easy loss.
1 yard away, right?
The last Washington games, I mean, Holmes mugged him. And then the NFL has to come out the next day and go, well, yeah, that was pass interference. I mean, there's another opportunity for another loss. And there was a couple games that if we do not make a play, if someone does not step up, and that is the mettle of a team, though, and that shows the head coach, but you're not going to get those plays every year, every week. The law of averages says that you are probably going to get less than you did the year before. So that's what worries me, is that if you do not have that 6-1 start, are we even having this Daniel Jones conversation after they went 3-7-1?
I've thought about that. I don't think so. I think if they did miss the playoffs this year and they were a 7-win team, I do think, especially have a worse record, better draft pick, I think most people would be on board of saying, all right, it's time to get a new guy. But I think that the whole playoff thing and not having weapons, quote unquote, that really talks people into, let's run this back and get better weapons. So that's probably what it'll come down to. Like, I was not convinced Jones would be back until I would say like maybe that Colts game when he had the 4 touchdown game. That's when I was like, all right, he's probably back. Like, I think he's proved like enough to earn himself another year, but it's still not 100%. Like, people that act like he's 100% back, you can't really say that. Like, there's only a few quarterbacks that are 100% back, and their names are Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, blah, blah, blah. Not everyone's 100% back, especially for a guy who had his 5th-year option declined, a new regime. You can't say these things coming off a year where, let's be honest, he was pretty good. Daniel Jones was not elite. He was not in the MVP conversation. He was pretty good. And, you know, I still think he's back. I'm not going to argue that, but it's just not like 100% guaranteed like some people make it out to be.
I think one of the most telling signs was, I can't remember what week it was in the season, that Brian Daboll was asked, if you have to throw the ball 30 times, can you win? And I mean, and this is why I have the man crush on the Daboll. And I've said this before. He comes out and says, I don't know. I mean, that is such a brutally honest answer that it should have scared some fans, because the initial response should have always been, hell yeah, we can throw 50 times and still win. He said, I don't know. And I'm like, wow. I was like, that was a great honest answer. Not what I wanted to hear, but that's an honest answer. But he has that understanding. And that's why, just like you, I have plenty of faith in Daboll. I liked the hire when it came down. I hated the Joe Judge hire. I got blasted because 15 minutes after the press conference, I did a video with a BS meter. And I kept saying the bullshit meter's in red with Joe every time he talks, because he has what I always refer to as coach speak. And that's all he was. And I always tell the telling sign about Joe Judge was in year 2, when he was doing the football drill, when he was going the ball drill and rolling in the mud, getting the ball and showing he was one of the guys. You watch Dalvin Tomlinson, and I pointed this out in the video, and I even circled it. Dalvin Tomlinson had the hose. He wasn't shooting Joe Judge, hitting the ball. He wasn't hitting him in his chest. He was shooting him in the face. And then it's kind of strange that next year he's gone. I mean, that he's no longer on the team because of the fact that he wasn't a coach. He was a guy that was a special teams coach who was put in a position which was not unattainable. But I think Brian Daboll understands not only how to coach, but also how to coach men. And I think that's one of the things that I'm not saying he's Parcellian, because Parcellian was the great communicator, maybe not with the press, but with his team. But I do think that he has some tendencies in reference to Parcells, in reference to communicating with the guys he has in the locker room, which will make him a better head coach down the pike. Because if your players believe in you, then there's, you never know what can happen, like this year.
Yeah. Yeah, the Joe Judge thing, I mean, it was pretty unexpected, I would say. Maybe not for you, but like for the rest of our fan base, it was like, yeah, he had, what were they? They were 6-10 the year before. They were almost made the playoffs till the Eagles tanked that game, which I thought would have been like, it might have been the worst thing for this like franchise if they made the playoffs that year, because that probably buys Joe Judge extra time when he didn't deserve it. So, thank you, Philly, for what you did in hindsight. But yeah, it really came out of nowhere. But Joe Judge, he talked himself out of that job. And I don't even know if Joe Judge was the guy they wanted to get that job. I just think he came into the interview and like blew them away. And I think I may have heard from somebody that they wanted Jim Harbaugh. I'm not exactly sure about that, but that might have been like where they were trying to go. I feel like I heard a voice recording from somebody pretty reliable once. So I don't know exactly if that's the case or not, but I really do think John Mara loves the opinion from Bill Belichick. And when he heard about Joe Judge and, Belichick's recommendation, he was like, oh, I cannot lose this guy. So we had to take him. And as you can see from, day one, from your perspective, he was not meant to be a head coach, especially for a team like the Giants.
Well, when Belichick, he was one of Belichick's favorite sons, and he was a special teams coordinator. The good thing about a special teams coordinator is, I will tell you this, they speak to the entire team.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just in the offensive room or the defense room, or you're in the position rooms. He speaks to the entire team. So he's out in front, so he should have a pulse or a better idea, and he was supposed to be this great communicator. But the problem was, you could tell when he was talking that something just wasn't there. And to the point that Belichick gave him the title of offensive assistant that year before so he could get a head coaching job. Yeah. And I think that was kind of, and I laugh because I think to myself, well, is is Bill still a little upset about what happened then with the 90s with the Giants when they went with Ray Handley and they didn't give him the job that maybe he's finally screwing him over 30 years later by giving him this guy, oh, it's gonna be the next great thing. Going, yeah, fuck yeah, right. You picked Ray Handley, okay, over me. So I do find that, like I said, Belichick tried to groom him for a job that he wasn't even ready for.
Yeah. It's pretty much how even the text message he sent to the wrong Brian that caused the entire Brian Flores situation. Bill Belichick has not had a good, few-year run here with the Giants. It has not gone in the right direction. All right, so where are we going next here? Do you want to talk about the draft and like what you would like to see in the first round? I think it's pick 25, correct?
You know what's crazy about this draft? It's the Giants need a wide receiver. They need a linebacker. I mean, I know everyone's going to talk about the defensive line and you need a defensive tackle, but you do have Dexter Lawrence. But Dexter Lawrence is more of a Leonard Williams type to me, that he's going to be a penetrator, but at least he finishes plays. But the problem is, while you do need a wide receiver, one of the biggest issues we had last year in reference to stopping the run was the running backs getting into the second level and no one being there to make the tackle. And I've said this a million times before. You can tell a good middle linebacker. You can easily tell, of course, on the field, but statistically, if you want to look at stats, if your middle linebacker has more solo tackles than assists, then he is going at the point of attack. He is making the play at the point of attack and not allowing it to go past the second level. Everyone talks about Tate Crowder and everyone talks about, I love to hit, the Derrick Henry hit. Look at that hit. Well, first of all, he hit him off to the side. He didn't hit him head on. And Henry even said, you know what? I figured out that I need to run a little bit lower. I was running too high that game. But the season before that, everyone wants to talk about his 116 tackles or whatever it was. And I always go back to people and say, why don't you look up that season and tell me how many solo tackles he has in reference to assists? And I saw maybe you're typing, so I was like, well, maybe he's looking that up. So that's why I was pontificating a little bit longer, so you could probably look that up for me.
I guess I want to guess. Was it like 40 something, like 45-ish?
I don't remember, but I remember it was like something like he had like 30 more assists than he did.
Okay.
Than he did solo tackles, which tells me that it's the old stat in the NFL. It's called the pile-on stat. You just jump on the pile and you automatically get an assist. He's not reaching the point of attack. And that's what happened when the Giants allowed players to get into that second level. When they got rid of Blake Martinez, no one was making that play towards the line of scrimmage. And where they're picking, it's a conundrum because of the fact that, are you really, you can find a quality wide receiver anywhere. You can get him in the 7th round. But are you really going to take that pick and go with a wide receiver that you may not be 100% sure of, that you may be able to get in the 2nd round? And I don't think there's a linebacker out of the top 20 that are probably worth, or, even, I don't even think in the top 10. I think, I don't think there's a linebacker worth taking at 25 because of the fact that you have so many other needs going back to, you need 2 guards, right away. Technically, you do need a center.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get I like Bellinger, but you need a tight end. You need someone that can catch the ball. But to me, is you need at least 1 outside linebacker, if not 2, and 2 middle linebackers, because the fact that our outside linebackers, our biggest problem was we could never maintain and hold the edge.
Yeah.
And the way our defensive ends played, they had problems setting the edge just as much because you also had rookies playing at those positions that were allowing these gashes. So it's a weird draft for me because normally I have a guy that I'm like, oh, this is the guy. But this team is just so, for a team that made the playoffs, you shouldn't have to sit there and go, okay, I need 2 guards, wide receiver, a tight end, potentially a running back. I'm going to need a CB2, potentially free safety, maybe 3 linebackers and 2 defensive ends that can play the run. So
it's like half of your 22 starters need to be replaced, basically. Like, it's not a good situation.
And I need a punter.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what direction. I don't know what, and like I said, that's why we just have YouTube channels. I mean, I don't know what direction the Giants should go because there is a plethora of needs and it's 1 pick. And how do you prioritize? And I'm going to ask you this question. How do you prioritize this? You need 2 interior linemen. because you talk about Daniel Jones not having protection. You know you need a wide receiver because you're saying people, well, not you, but people are saying you don't have any wide receivers. You know you need to stop the run because that was one of the worst parts of your defense. So you know you're going to need a linebacker, you're going to need a defensive end, and you're going to need a CB2 because also you may need a CB1 because you don't know if Adoree Jackson is going to redo his contract to stay with the team, and you don't know what his health is.
Yeah.
How does Mike Too Nice sit there and say, as a Giant, I am now the general manager? How do I prioritize with this one pick? And I think we have 11 in the entire draft. Which direction this team should go. And this is a team that won 9 games and made the playoffs.
That's why, like, personally, I'm fine. Like, I know people will hate this take, but I'm okay if you let Jones and Barkley go. I really like, there's so much to do with this team. You know, it was a fun season, 9 wins, but as you just mentioned, like half of your starters need to be replaced and you just don't have the money to do it. I mean, if Barkley wants to come back for like 12 mil a year, I heard 14 was the number. I would prefer 12. Then like, sure. But, you know, giving your quarterback this amount of money that people are talking about, it doesn't seem responsible with the amount of holes on this roster. And we just talked about how the Giants were really good in one-score games. It was the same thing for Minnesota this year. Those things, they always revert back to the mean, and the Giants won't be probably as successful in these one-score tight games next year. That's just how it is. So for me, I would not mind resetting the clock on this franchise and trying to get a new quarterback, whether it's some stopgap dude or like you love somebody in the draft. I know you're not a big Anthony Richardson guy, but I can definitely talk myself into him because I trust our coaching staff. You like Hendon Hooker, right? That's your guy?
I love Hooker, though, but you don't get a kind of and you might be too young, but you don't get a kind of a Kiwi Smith feel.
Too young.
Okay, because I keep getting this a Kiwi Smith feel out of Oregon. 1 year, okay stats, big time program. Kind of actually even reminds me of the way that he plays. That and it's just, I don't know. Can you take him at 25?
Well, yeah, what was his name? Kiwi Smith.
Yeah, it's what is it? AKII Smith.
Oh,
He was
Kiwi.
a Kiwi Smith. He went with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
It was after the David Klinger fiasco.
Okay,
but,
so, but like, no, my point was going to be like, my point was going to be that like the quarterback position has changed so much since that time. You know what I mean? Like now you see so many guys rushing for over 500 yards when you didn't see it as much back then. And Richardson's one of his main, like, you know, one of the main things you would love him for is the use of his legs, which, you know, Daniel Jones had 700 rushing yards himself. So if Richardson gives you 800 rushing yards next year, that's going to help out a lot. And I think a lot about quarterbacks now is like the physical tools they have. And I think Richardson has a lot. Like that's one of the reasons I never fell in love with Daniel Jones at first. And I called him Kansas City's version of Alex Smith when we drafted him, is because like I just didn't see the physical tools that other people saw. Like some people were telling me like, oh, Daniel Jones can make all the throws, he has all the tools, but he's a stiff athlete, he's not very twitchy, he doesn't make guys miss. Daniel Jones, he has a pretty good arm, but it's not a rocket. So, you know, I didn't see like those big physical traits that you see from a Josh Allen or a Mahomes. And that's the type of quarterback I want. And sometimes those guys flop. Like I think DeShone Kizer is another guy that you can kind of talk about who had a great arm, had some mobility. Like those guys do flop. But the reason I think Richardson's intriguing is because we have the coaches that would bring the best out of him. Like if they were able to make Josh Allen this big question mark out of Wyoming into what he is now, and Daniel Jones, who, you know, his career was on life support coming into this year, into a respectable quarterback. If you get Richardson, I get the footwork sucks. I get the mechanics suck. I get there's inconsistencies everywhere, but man, that kid can do things physically that other quarterbacks can't do. So that's why if the coaches feel they can coach him up, I can talk myself into it.
I don't have I mean, like I said, I'm the same way. I am trusting the Dable. I'm trusting the Shane. But I mean, his mechanics suck. His footwork sucks. Beyond that, you know, and he doesn't really read the defenses too well because he only had 17 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, I believe, this year. So I saw, and like I said, the reason I fell in love with Hooker was the fact that was the Florida game, because the Florida game was supposed to be the shootout. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be these two great quarterbacks going head to head, and the quarterback that I saw that stood above everyone. And yes, he is 25 years old, and yes, blah 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 blah. But if the way he looked at that field, the way he read that Florida defense, the way he moved with fluidity in the pocket, his footwork was, and while he is not I would say a running quarterback, he is more of a scrambling quarterback because there is a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I fall in love with Hooker, because of the fact that, also, I don't mind the fact that he's 25. I don't think he's a Brandon Weeden. I don't think he's as Chris Winkie.
Wasn't Joe Burrow like 25 or 24 maybe? Like,
Joe Burrow was older coming out. Yes.
Yeah.
Because and that's the thing. Physically, he's more mature now. And I think you reach your physical maturity between 24 to 25, where you're not going to keep growing, and this is what you are, and you're kind of already grown into your body, especially in the NFL. And even with the ACL, I would still take him. I would do like a Jalen Smith, like Dallas did when he blew out his knee, in the bowl game. Take him in the second round. I would take Hooker in the second round.
Right.
And even if you want to get a stopgap quarterback, I have no problem with that. The only thing I have a problem with Richardson is, yes, there is talent, but even, and I was laughing as you were saying it, doesn't read the field, doesn't have good footwork. He kind of has also, to me, a little of that Dwayne Haskins feel. And okay. I did not like Dwayne Haskins coming out of college. I got called so many different things because I said I do think the Giants need to stay far away from him, because if you watch him throw, I called him a lollipop thrower, and it wasn't going to go well in the NFL, especially in the Meadowlands, because a lollipop thrower to me is a guy that has a nice arcing ball, but it goes up like a lollipop.
Yeah.
And you get that into the wind, and you're not throwing it with enough velocity, your deep ball is not going to work out very well. And I worried about his ability to read the defenses at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of get that feeling. Is Richardson an athlete, or is Richardson a quarterback?
Oh, he's definitely more athlete right now, at least. But I think you can teach that stuff. You know what I mean? Like the physical part, you can't teach. If that makes any sense.
No. What you're saying is you cannot, and that's true. You cannot teach athletic ability.
Yeah.
You cannot make someone an athlete. You either are an athlete or you're not an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And he is definitely an athlete. But the problem is, can you make an athlete a quarterback?
Right.
And my question is to you, name me a quarterback who was mainly an athlete over the last 10 years that came into this league and actually excelled as a quarterback.
And was he considered like a project, or can I like just say Cam Newton or something like?
Well, Cam Newton was he won a national championship. He was definitely going number one overall. He was an athlete, but he was a number one overall pick. To me, is not a project.
Right.
True. I mean, so you got to look at it that way. Just, and I always tell people, just name me one guy.
Well, Josh Allen's my go-to.
Josh Allen's your go-to guy.
Yeah.
But name me, and we've already talked about, name me another guy though.
Am I allowed to say Jalen Hurts? Is that like stupid to say? It's like borderline,
That's borderline. I think Jalen Hurts, I don't think he's much as an athlete as he is a leader. And I think I think he gets the most out of his physical talents because of his work ethic and the way and the system that's around him. I'm not saying he's not a good, I don't consider him an athlete. Like Michael Vick to me was an athlete who played quarterback.
Yeah.
I say the same thing because I always got blasted for Malik Willis because I still like Malik Willis. Malik Willis to me was always an athlete over him being a quarterback. And I always said he's going to need to like 3 years before he can even, he'll really be, he's a project guy because he's an athlete more than he's a quarterback right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's the only thing. If you are coming off a 9-win season, is the fan base going to accept allowing Daniel Jones to go and you're drafting an athlete over a guy that, because you and like I said, you have realistic expectations of the team, which is great. A lot of people don't. A lot of people is going to say it's going to be 14 wins next year, but you have to realistically look at this. And I don't know if they would have maybe Shane would have the guts to do it. I might be talking myself into it.
Well, my question always is like, you play for Super Bowls. Like, are you playing to be average and just be in the conversation? Like, because this is like going back to the Brooklyn Nets. their owner pisses me off, Joe Tsai. There was a quote that came out about him that said he would rather have a 40-win team that he's proud of than rather than having superstars that kind of drive him crazy. I'm like, are you playing to win championships or just have a team that's like right around average? Like, that's the difference here. If you bring back Daniel Jones, you're going to be an average team, probably flirt with the playoffs the next few years, blah, blah, blah. But if you take one of these high upside quarterbacks like a Richardson or something else, and he does, it hits, or somebody else, whatever, you trade for whoever. I heard Justin Fields is on the block, Lamar Jackson, whoever you want to get. That's making like a big time move to be like, all right, a couple more pieces and we're right in the Super Bowl conversation. I don't want to tread water, be average. That's like where I am as a fan, because I want to win championships. I don't care about 8, 9, 7 wins every year. Like, it's nice, it's fun in the moment, but then you look at it like, damn, like I want to be where Philly is and the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals. I want to be in that conversation, and what the Ravens have had for forever, and the Steelers with Roethlisberger. That's what I want. But I feel like a lot of people in this fan base don't exactly feel the same way.
And I don't disagree. And it's almost the Minnesota. Going back and not picking on Kirk Cousins, it's the Minnesota scenario. You're going to make the playoffs every year, but you're probably going to be one and done. Is that what you want as a fan base? Because you had Eli Manning, of course. When he won his 2 Super Bowls, everyone seems to forget the 2006 season, and how people started turning against him in 2006 and 2007. They only remember him winning the two championships. But there was a lot of mediocrity in between those years. And now a lot of it also was because of ownership and Jerry Reese, but we're not going to get into that. But do you want to be in that mediocre? I mean, if you think about it, like, especially with Eli Manning had some of his best seasons in the latter half of his career, where he threw for over 30 touchdowns. He threw for over 4,000 yards, but he was on average teams because he didn't have the talent around him.
Yeah.
And even Mara said that they wasted a lot of Eli Manning's career. Is that what we want, to your point, as a fan, though? Do we want to have that, make it to the playoffs every couple of years and miss it for every couple of years, and then never sniff the championship again for another, 20 years? Or do you take a shot? I always say in my channel, be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. Mm-hmm. So maybe sometimes, because Shane and them were bold taking Josh Allen. Do they follow the model of the Buffalo Bills and kind of go that way? I mean, it's intriguing.
There's no right or wrong way to build an NFL team, but I just think like that is like that's how you hit your highest maximum upside, if that makes sense, or highest potential, is like you take those chances. Like, sure, you can be a San Francisco 49ers and survive with Jimmy Garoppolo, who was one throw away from winning them the Super Bowl in 2019 when he overthrew Emmanuel Sanders. But it's tough to get a team. I've told people this, to get a team like the Niners and have that entire roster. It's almost impossible. Like, it's easier almost to hit on a quarterback than to find a Fred Warner and, Ayuk and Samuel and Kittle and Trent Williams for a 3rd and 5th round pick. Like, that stuff is very hard to do. And people act like, you can do that pretty easily. It's not that easy. Like, you have to have usually a top 10 quarterback wins the Super Bowl. There are outliers. I mean, 2015 Peyton was god awful. I mean, we've seen some outliers, 2000 as well with Dilfer, right? I mean, that was bad too. But for the most part, Dilfer is the only quarterback not to be brought back the next season after winning the Super Bowl. And you had Brad Johnson. Yeah, I mean, Brad Johnson won in Tampa. I mean, you've had guys that were average, but if you look at those situations, what did Dilfer have in that 2000 Super Bowl? Amazing defense.
Yeah. Amazing. Brad Johnson. What did Brad Johnson have when he won in Tampa?
I wasn't as familiar, but probably a great defense.
He had Derek Brooks, he had Warren Sapp, all their careers. He had John Lynch, he had Rondé Barber. He had a great defense. So if you're telling me though that we're going to win with Daniel Jones and you're building this defense, I'm going to tell you that if I look back in the annals of NFL history in reference to the Super Bowl, not many just average quarterbacks have won the Super Bowl outside of a handful.
Yeah.
And when they did, there was something spectacular alongside them, or something. Everyone will point to Phil Simms. Phil Simms won the Giants Super Bowl in '86. He set the passing record, and they always disparage him. Phil Simms, people forget when he retired, had over 33,000 yards, he was in the top 15 in reference to passing yards, touchdowns, completions when he retired.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually had a career outside of that Super Bowl, but only fans that are not old enough to remember only know what he did in '86.
Right.
They don't
understand. Wasn't Phil Simms injured sometimes too?
When he got drafted in '79, he was actually runner-up for Rookie of the Year to Otis Anderson. Of course, came around number 24 for the Giants, but then he was leading the Giants to the playoffs in '81 and got hurt. Then he got hurt again in '82. He got hurt again in '83. Then he was the first quarterback in New York Giants history to throw for over 4,000 yards in 1984. And then his career kind of went that way. Right. And then he got benched after 90 for Hostetler, but then he came back and resurrected his career. So he had a career arc.
Yeah.
So he was never really an average quarterback. He was a well above average quarterback who just ran into injuries and some Ray Hanley and some other weird
Back to because I saw a quote, I think it was last week, from Howie Roseman, of course, the GM of the Eagles, and he's had this quote. He said, "The moves look like gambles. They paid off big time with a Super Bowl berth." Roseman said Monday that he never fears taking a big swing when the alternative is settling for mediocrity. And that is exactly what I want. I don't want mediocrity. If you swing and miss and you end up being a crap team because of it, hey, NFL draft, you get your team back on track in just a few years. But I think it's worth taking those chances. I think treading water is the worst thing that a team can do. I don't care what sport it is. I mean, I guess baseball, you can kind of catch fire and some sports like that. But NBA, NFL, especially, you need to have top end rosters, and for the NBA superstars, for the NFL quarterbacks. If you don't have those, it's tough. It's very tough. There are outliers, but
how many times, and I was thinking about this, how many times have the Nets had a core of players that I think a Russian traded for some guys, the big three, and that didn't work out. And then we had the big three again. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good analogy, especially for that Brooklyn team.
That team with Pierce and Garnett was not good, but the Nets with Harden, they should have won in 21. They just got hurt.
You only mortgaged the franchise for those guys. I mean,
tell me.
That was it. I mean, what? I don't want to get off the Giant talk for a second though, but I'm a quasi Sixers fan because I go to all the games. I sit courtside a lot because I have season tickets there too. And it's interesting because you have Harden, and when Harden to me was with the Nets, I thought some ways he was trying to fit into the system. He was trying to fit into Kyrie and to Kevin and everything else. But it was weird though, because he came over to Philadelphia and now he seems like he's the same Harden back in Houston.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys did something right for a period of time with Harden. So I got to give credit. I got to give the Nets credit for that.
Well, with Harden, he had Mike D'Antoni his first year in Brooklyn, and then Harden's second year, D'Antoni left. Right. And apparently him and Nash had disagreements about how to run the offense, and that was one of the reasons, and partially with Kyrie's vaccine thing, as to why Harden got out. So, yeah, it's unfortunate.
not to get off topic, but I just
yeah, no, it makes me sad. All right, so
you could be a Knicks fan, man.
No, that's mediocrity.
You could be a Knicks fan, and that could be worse.
No, people tell me that, but we just ranted on here for 20 minutes about mediocrity. That's not what I want. I'm sorry. At least the Nets take swings. They get my hopes up and they crush me, but still.
I gotta say for the Knicks though, man, the Knicks, they take swings, but they just always go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, seems like it. So you said usually in the draft there's a player that you really gravitate towards. Is there anybody around pick 25 you think that you would be a big fan of? I've done some research lately. I have some guys I like, but anyone for you?
No, and like I said, this is the weirdest draft that I've had in the last couple of years for the Giants, because normally, like I said, I'll have 3 or 4 guys. It's just and thank God, like I said, that we don't have to make this decision because of the fact that there are just there's so many holes that need to be filled, and they're so interconnected that it's what do you prioritize? I would almost wish and hope they took a quarterback, because then I don't have to think, well, do you take the guard? Do you take a wide receiver? Is there a linebacker worthy enough? Do you take the best player available, because of the fact that not that you're in a position to take the best player available, because the only teams that usually are winners, for consistently can do that. But I mean, what do you prioritize to the point that if you can't keep Daniel Jones upright, it doesn't matter who he's throwing to? Then you could say if you keep him upright and the guy doesn't catch the ball, it doesn't make much sense either. You don't know which way you're going to go. But which way is the most important? Because your offensive line is going to be in tatters next year. Feliciano's gone, Gates is gone, Glowinski is going to be here because he's got that stupid contract, and I understand why they did it. That his dead cap number is almost the exact same number as his salary, so he's not going to go anywhere. You know, we're not going to sit there and rely on, I always call Matt from Connecticut. You know, we're not going to rely on Matt from Connecticut anymore because he's got to be gone. I mean, you got it's just to me, the offensive line needs to be addressed. And I don't know if you prioritize that over wide receiver, but then I also don't know. Everyone always talks about the Giants have this huge amount of cap space, huge amount of cap. We got all the cap space in the friggin' world, third most in the league. Well, we don't have a quarterback signed.
Yeah.
And we don't have our running back signed.
Our best offensive player is not signed either. Yeah.
So once you sign one or two of those guys, that $44 million, and you'll have more than 44, but not much, because you have to remember the top 3 guys, I believe the top 4 guys right now on this roster eat up something like 30% of your salary cap. And you're not going to be able to move on from you. And Shane has already shown a propensity of not wanting to renegotiate and extend out money. So once you sign that quarterback, how are you going to address the offensive line?
That's what drives me crazy. I'm not a good salary cap person. I kind of understand dead caps and stuff like that. But that's the thing. People expect to sign Jones and Barkley for what they want and still put the roster around those guys. Like, how? You have to have the most perfect draft ever to have that happen. Like, what do you expect? People tell you have 55. No, it's 54 guys under contract right now. No, 55 now with Hodgins signing. So you have 55 guys under contract. You can have 90 going into the training camp, of course. And then the rule of 51 does not take it into effect in reference to the salary cap. And, you know, that takes an effect and does not leave until after you break camp. So you don't need to worry about that really. And you do need to be underneath the cap before the start of the new year in March. But the Giants don't have to worry about that. But the problem is you have that $44 million. You are not going to get much else out of the guys you're going to release unless you renegotiate. And once you sign Daniel Jones, and that's why they're not going to tag him, because you tag him, it's an automatic $32 million cap hold let's say 50 million. So you only have 18 million then to move forward, and you need 11 to sign your draft class. And so that's leaving you now with 7 million. So if they sign Jones this year for 4 or 5 years, what would his cap hit be in the first year if you had to guess? Like, what number are we going to be around?
Will try to keep it around 20.
All right.
Because of the fact that, and here's the thing though, and I said I have a video coming, I think tomorrow, and I talk about this a little bit, but I'll talk about it now. Everyone's always like, well, you know, Daniel Jones should just take less up that first year. He should just take less. Okay, you're 25 years old. This may be your big contract in the league. And are you really going to take less? I've said, and I always ask this, I'm going to ask Mike Too Nice this question. Mike Too Nice is at his job. He's doing his job average, if not, you know, above average. Your boss comes to you and says, we want to give you a raise, but you need to take less. We're not going to give you as much raise.
What does that mean?
You need to take less money. You need to, why I can give you $30 an hour extra. You only can take 15. And then maybe we'll give you the rest later. Are you going to sit there and say, oh yeah, I'll do that?
Knowing my personality, I would, but most people would not.
Well, so, no, I would. Hell no, you're going to give me the full $30 because I know you could give me $30. So Daniel Jones, in the same way, he's a professional athlete. He is a guy that this is his career. So he is going to, and I've said this a million times, why I think the Leonard Williams contract was terrible. I think the Kenny G contract was terrible. I did not like the Adoree Jackson signing because we were the only team willing to give him a raise after coming off an ACL injury. I didn't like those contracts, but I understood from a player's perspective, your career is only about 4.5 years on average. You get the most amount of money you can up front, and you get it guaranteed. So what's Daniel Jones's benefit? If he believes in himself, if he thinks there's that team out there that is going to give him more money, why would you take less up front?
Yeah, I mean, look, you would hope he would give the Giants a discount, but it's not going to be a crazy discount. If he's getting $10 million extra elsewhere, I mean, he's gone. So But my question was from the beginning, what team do you think gives him that contract? Like, do you think Washington really steps in? Like, have we heard any rumors about like, oh, blank team wants Daniel Jones if Giants don't pursue it? Like, I have not heard anything.
The only thing I've heard is Washington. That's the only thing I heard. And honestly, you have Heineke there. And
he's all right.
Heineke is, you know, and I'll use the phrase, Heineke is an average NFL quarterback who you are paying like an average NFL quarterback. You've already proven you may not, Heineke's already taken them to the playoffs. People forget about this.
You almost beat Brady.
You almost beat Brady in the playoffs. So you can get to you may not win, but you can get to the playoffs with Heineke. And you may only have to pay him $5 million. So, I mean, I can't see, you know, the Saints are looking at Carr. The Saints are $40 million over the cap. So that's going to be a difficult situation.
Yeah.
I think Carolina's going to draft their guy. I don't think they're going to go after someone else's retread.
That sounds like an Anthony Richardson spot, Carolina. I could see it.
I could see that. I mean, Tampa needs a quarterback, but I mean, does Tampa really, does the Tampa offense really fit Daniel Jones? Because even with Brady's advanced age and with the wide receivers they have, they took shots down the field quite extensively.
Yeah.
I mean, where's his landing spot? I personally think the Giants have leverage.
Me too. I've been saying that. Yes, I agree.
I don't know if they're going to drop the hammer and use it because of Mara, but I do think they have the leverage over Jones. I think if you're going to do this contract, you have to make it. You have to spread. A lot of times with these contracts, they front load it with the bonus money, so they'll only have like an $8 million salary, but they'll have a $30 million bonus.
Right.
You're going to, which still counts, it still partially counts against the cap in certain percentages. So, I mean, you have to keep it, like I said, you have to make it 5 years. You got to make it reasonable enough in year one that allows you to keep a retooling because you're not going to hit on all 11 draft picks. And you still need to sign some free agents. So if you can keep it at that 20 million mark, and then you still turn around and have anywhere between 55 to 60, it leaves you with 40 million in salary cap space. I tag Barkley personally because it's 10.1. He made 8 last year. It's a $2 million bump in his pay. I know he won't be happy about it, but he's 25 years old. I don't care. You had one really good season after coming off another injury. Let's see you do it again, and then I'll give you an Ezekiel Elliott contract, and that'll allow you to keep everyone and still sign anyone. But the downfall is, we've said it before, you're going to have to make it 5 years.
Are you saying you would give him the Zeke contract if he played well?
No.
I was gonna say I would not do that.
No. I would tag him if he had another good season. No, I'd probably let him walk.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I think you tag him for this upcoming year. Hopefully he plays well. He'll be 27 that year after that, and then you just say, all right, thanks for your services. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a huge Barkley fan. I mean, I have to admit, I love the pick. I did. I understood what you're saying, that you don't take a running back at second overall when you have so many other holes. But I thought he was a talent that was going to transcend. And that first year, it looked really good. And it was just, it's going back to the old days. It was almost like a Gale Sayers moment where Gale Sayers came in the league, took it by storm, and then got hurt and then was never the same again. So you kind of hope that wasn't the way Barkley was going, but he came back. He proved he was strong, but running backs you can get in the later rounds and be successful. So like I said, if I tag him at 10 is a palatable number because of the fact that I'm only going to have him for 1 year. And then maybe you can work something out for a 2-year deal after that, or you just let him go.
Well, I was going to ask you this question because I know where I stand on this. Like, would you rather give $13-14 million per year to a guy like a Saquon Barkley or a very good center or a very good left guard or right guard? Like, I would go with the offensive lineman personally. I would go if I'm drafting well, and I know I've been drafting well over the last couple of years, and I can find a running back in the later rounds. I would definitely do that. I would use that money to retool the offensive line, because if you don't have an offensive line, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to run or pass. It's another reason I hated the pick. I'm like, you don't have the offensive line. You know what annoyed me the most about the Barkley pick was Dave Gettleman, because he was basically not taking calls for that pick and openly admitted it. And then you see these like offers come out afterwards of like, oh, the Giants got 2 firsts and something else from the Broncos, and Dave Gettleman wouldn't answer the phone. I'm like, how are you a GM and don't answer the phone? Like, I get you wanted the guy, but like, oh, it just drives me crazy.
How do you trade your pick and take Kadarius Toney?
Well, that too. I was not a Kadarius fan. I will say that.
I mean, if anyone, we did a live stream on the draft, and I had a lot of people on, and it was funny though, because you know, a lot of people we had on screen, and when the pick came in, when they traded the pick, I was like, how the hell you have Parsons sitting right there?
Oh yeah.
You have he's not LT, but he could be that next good to great giant linebacker, and you already lost out on Smith. But now you're going to trade the pick and take Kadarius Toney, whose only good season was a COVID season after having 3 other previous seasons at Florida. And I loved it because the best scouting report for Kadarius Toney was his route running is unique. And I always said, anytime a scout says it's unique, it means you do not do it very well.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest concern with him, that he was going to do that. And that was another thing that Gettleman's just screwed, you know, he screwed the pooch on that, you know, exponentially. But like I said, I didn't have a fault with the Barkley pick, and maybe it was blinded by what he did at Penn State, because I live in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it was that, but like I said, it was looking good. You know, it was looking,
he was incredible. Like, he was gonna be a Hall of Famer. Like, there was no doubt about it. That's the thing. It sucks. Yeah.
But like I said, but you can get a running back later in the draft. You know, you can find who was the kid in Jacksonville? What's his name? Harrison. He got traded to the Jets. He had
James Robinson.
James Robinson. Thank you.
Yeah.
He was an undrafted free agent, and I think he had 2 seasons over 1,000 yards in Jacksonville.
Have you seen Isaiah Pacheco on the Chiefs? 7th round pick, right?
At Rutgers.
Yeah. My friends were hyping him up too. They always hype up Rutgers players, and I'm like, shut up. And like, they finally got one right. So I'm like, all right, you guys are right.
We finally got, hey, listen, I'm a Rutgers alum. We finally got one right. So, give us that after everything that happened with Shiano, you know, and after he left us, you got to give us at least one thing.
Exactly.
But like I said, you can get that guy later. So I mean, it's I would rather, to your point, I'd rather rebuild the offensive line or rebuild the linebacking core.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you a few more questions, then we'll get out of here, because you were right. We definitely went over the 45 minutes as you expected. But so if you were to guess right now, is Daniel Jones a Giant next year? Yes or no? Ooh, tough.
Well, the question is, do you want my fan answer? Or
no, I think I know your fan answer. I mean, we could do both if you want, but I want like what you actually think is going to happen.
I do think he's going to be back next year.
Okay. And what's the fan answer?
The fan answer is hell no. I don't want him back next year. I've sat through too many games with Daniel Jones, but I am concerned. Like I said, I trust Shane. I trust Dable. I don't trust Mara. The Eli Manning contract, that last contract, that $90+ million contract, hamstringed this team. And it was at a point where Eli needed to go. I remember it was 3 years before he retired. He played that last game against Washington on New Year's Eve. And it was
terrible.
I remember that game because I stood on the sideline that entire game. It was like -20. I've put pictures on Twitter all the time about it. And I have the face mask on and everything else. It was -20 degrees. And we all stayed because we all were under the assumption that was Eli Manning's last game as a Giant.
It should have been.
Norleans Darkwa runs the ball for over 100 yards. The Giants win the game. He's on the field. And we all were staying there because we figured this was it. But then we got another couple. You had another couple.
Two more years.
And then we kind of see where it went. So I worry that Mara could potentially override Shane. And I know he didn't do it with the Dable pick, because I know people were worried that he was not going to allow him to pick his head coach. He got his guy in Dable.
Yeah.
I still worry that he's got that Eli Manning Marado's connection with Daniel Jones. And I think sometimes Mara acts more as a fan and likes to hold on to players that he likes and gets rid of guys like Odell that he doesn't like, even though it's going to wreck the salary cap. So that concerns me greatly.
Yes, that was actually one of my first concrete takes when I made the YouTube channel was Eli Manning like needs to go. It's been too long, and I think I was saying this since 2017 because you like even though they won 11 games in 16, you can see the Eli decline happening. Right, 2015 was his last like really good year. I think he had 35 passing touchdowns. Then 2016, great defense. He signed OV, Jenkins, and Snacks, and you had a great defense that carried you. And then 2017, yeah, it's kind of like you can blame the weapons because they all got hurt. Odell snaps his ankle. Brandon Marshall, same game, out for the year. I think Sterling Shepard missed half the year. You can blame the weapons, but you can tell Eli just did not have it anymore. He did not want to take hits, and he was just not the same guy he once was. And, you know, Gettleman comes in, and whether that was John Mara induced or whether it wasn't, which I kind of think it was, they decided to just kind of go all in for 2018. Which did set the Giants back, and John Mara later admitted that. And Mara did say, I think Jordan Raanan asked him the question like 2 years ago, like, did you force the Giants or did you force Dave Gettleman to keep Eli Manning? And John Mara denied it and said, that's crazy. I wouldn't do that. But like, I think he did. I think he was lying there. Yeah.
I think it was owner speak. I think he did. And I think, like I said, I think he thought like Eli Manning was like a son, you know, to him. And I think it was just hard for him to let go of the past. I always think about Wellington Mara, his father, you know, and Wellington knew Wellington after, and this is going to be the last old timer story I'm going to tell. Wellington after the miracle in the Meadowlands, when Joe Pisarcik fumbled and Herm Edwards ran it in for the touchdown. That was the lowest point that the Giants had ever had. And Wellington Mara was a very hands-on owner. He was almost Jerry Jones-esque up to that point. And the story goes that, and a lot of people have gotten the story wrong, that the NFL made the Giants hire George Young, but they didn't. And that's the thing, because George Young talks about this in his book, and a couple other people do too, that Wellington then turned over the reins and said to Pete Rozelle, is there a young executive I can hire that can come in and run this organization? And I'm hoping that John is taking that a little bit from Wellington and understands, you know what, let me step back. It sucks, but let me step back and let my football guys make these decisions, because maybe I'm influenced a little bit out of personal loyalty to some of these guys. And that's kind of what I'm hoping. I got my fingers crossed.
That's exactly. I wrote a letter to John Mara last year, probably last November, saying that exact thing. I'm like, you need to get outside people in this organization, like what you have been doing here and trying to promote these in-house guys. Because it really felt like, and it's scary as hell to think this, that if Joe Judge didn't talk himself out of the job, it was going to be Joe Judge as the head coach and then Kevin Abrams as GM. Like that's the direction that I think he wanted to go. And I'm not taking credit, but like, thank God it did not go that way, because I love the way that we have gone from that possibility to much, much better with Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll. So, you know, I don't know. I'm so happy he went that way. And I hope you're right. I hope that John Mara, and like Mara's a good owner. I don't want to say he's not. Like he definitely cares. I appreciate John Mara, but like he can't make the decisions about the football team because it just doesn't go well.
That's the thing, though, I think, and that is sometimes to your detriment. He cares.
Yeah.
And I think and it's not that he doesn't care about the fans. I think he cares about the guys that he drafts, guys that come in through the organization, guys that, you know, it's difficult to make. When Phil Simms got released back in '93, it was time. And Phil Simms came back off a great season under one of his best seasons that he had under Dan Reeves his entire career. And the Giants let him go, because of the fact that he was, I think, 37 or 38 at that point in time. It was time to move on. It was time to move on from Lawrence Taylor. I remember Lawrence Taylor's first game. I remember his last game, his last 2 years. It was time to move on. And the Giants going back to, like I said, to George Young and Wellington, understood that you reach a point, and these are guys that were legends in Giant uniforms, that it's time to move. Harry Carson, it was time to move on. It's time to make that step. And I hope that John is now reaching that point and is understanding this guy may be, you're a Giant for life. I love you, and I understand that, but I got to replace you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the goal of every franchise is to get those trophies that are behind me.
And that's what John wants, ultimately. I just don't think he does. He doesn't know how to get it. That's his problem. But hopefully now he hired the guys that know how to get there. So that's what we're hoping for.
Finger crossed.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, that's pretty much going to close it out. Once again, if you guys enjoyed, me and Tim will definitely get back together in the future. But Tim, I appreciate you coming on. It's been long overdue. It's been a rough couple weeks here. I was trying to set this up earlier, but then the Nets traded their whole team, and that other Nets podcast was busy for me. So thank you for coming on, you know, kind of late notice in a way, but yeah, appreciate it.
Well, like I said, I appreciate coming on, and I appreciate anytime I get an opportunity to speak Giants. And, you know, like I said, it's 2023. You got to hope it's the right direction. And we just have to hope that, that they roll the dice and they come up sevens like they did last year.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We'll talk to you guys next time. And